or none or all of our sister colonies. Frankly, friends, to me there's no great surprise there. Having served in that body myself, I can attest that more than half the men in the Congress are lawyers who love to hear themselves talk. And as a result, very little gets done in any timely fashion. But we do expect to hear some favorable reply every day, and you will, of course, be kept apprised by way of the Gazette. So then, that is the news on this 18th day of July, 1776. However, as I have so many of you here gathered before me, I cannot resist the temptation to address you upon something that is very near to my own heart. For our convention certainly did not adjourn with merely declaring our independence. In truth, the hardest part of our work remained ahead. And it was then very sagely proposed that before we get around to writing that new Constitution, that first we should compose that Bill of Rights, which old Fiddlehead so nobly proposed in his resolution. The understanding being here, you see, that this enumeration, or this list of individual liberties, would serve as the foundation and the basis of our government. That we would build our government based upon the principles contained in that most important declaration. This we ratified upon the 12th of June, and for the reason of that document, which I personally hold to be the most important document ever conceived in the history of man, with the exception of the Holy Writ itself, I shall forevermore regard Williamsburg to be the birthplace of American liberty. Not Philadelphia, not Boston, with all respect, but rather Williamsburg, because with this Bill of Rights, which is the first ever of its kind, and what I pray will serve as an example for others to imitate into the future. For the first time ever in your lives, my friends, or in the histories of your families or your ancestors, you are no longer beholden to your government. Instead, your government is now beholden to you. You are no longer subject to some distant monarch. You are now citizens in a self-governing nation. Aren't you? With this citizenship come a great many responsibilities and obligations. In my view, it is not the mark of a good citizen to simply obey civil laws or to be a peaceable neighbor. It requires much, much more. In a word, it requires eternal vigilance, to be ever watchful of those men in government. For even though I myself have held a place in public office for these last dozen years, nonetheless I have now, and I will have so long as I breathe, a very deep and abiding suspicion of those designing men in government. For we have found all too often, throughout all the ages, that there do come those unhappy moments in the course of human events when unworthy men are catapulted into the halls of power. And in their constant and their inevitable ambition to seize or maintain even greater political influence, they have always found that the surest and best means for them to do so is to first deprive the citizenry of those God-given rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. Thus now, as citizens, we have placed a never-ending responsibility upon the shoulders of each and every one of you, and regardless of your age or your gender, be ever watchful, informed, active, participatory, and to guard with jealous attention anyone who should ever approach that precious jewel of rights, your Bill of Rights. I do pray that we as a people will ever be up to that very, very great challenge. I've prattled on long enough, I suppose, about matters of politics, and for that I should wish to apologize to the ladies here present. I know you have very little mind or inclination for such things. Do forgive me. It, however, was suggested by Mr. Speaker that I offer forth an opportunity to this polite company to pose to me any queries or curiosities that you might have, be they regarding my person or our general state of affairs. And furthermore, I have demonstrated already upon numerous occasions a most remarkable and uncanny ability to speculate into the future with great accuracy. I certainly would not wish to style myself a soothsayer. And by the way, I have already upon several occasions explained how it is that I am so often able to make very accurate predictions of future events, to the point where there are several of my contemporaries who refer to me in such terms as these: Henry the Prophet, the far-seeing Henry, Henry the Visionary. Very simply, friends, because I've always been most devoted to the subject. I'm not the only one in this polite company to have observed that history is a curious thing, in that it seemingly repeats itself over and again. I suppose largely owing to the fact that the nature of man never changes. And thus that which occurred 10 or 50 or 200 years into the past, you may depend upon it, you'll see it again 10 or 50 or 200 years into the future. We study history that we might be able to learn the lessons which have already been gleaned by our ancestors, and it is to be hoped at least to prevent the same mistakes from being repeated. Though more often than not, it seems as though we never do quite fully grasp those most essential of instructions. So, at this time, your questions, and may I respectfully propose, for purposes of order, owing to these rather goodly numbers, that you first raise up your hands and be recognized. Furthermore, informs me that there may be indeed likenesses of General Washington upon specie or coin here in our country. I think that he would vigorously protest that idea, frankly, for he's quite modest. And I suppose he would probably say that any coin that had his likeness on it would have very little value. But I am of a differing opinion. I'll tell you, he's a difficult man to figure. I dare say that for the first 9 years of my being acquainted with him, that is, serving in the House of Burgesses together, I don't think he said a single word to me the entire time. Imagine then, for he is a man of few words, imagine then my great surprise, and frankly my elation, when shortly following our elections to the first Congress, for he and I were 2 of the 7, he strode up to me, for he strides everywhere he goes, a larger, stronger, tougher, more determined man you'll never meet, and he invited me to make that long 10-day journey to Philadelphia with him. And I very eagerly accepted, wanting to know his mind. You know, back in those days, he was far more often seen in the company of Lord Dunmore than he was with any gentleman of my acquaintance. But he said something to me along that ride that convinced me beyond measure that he was closer to my camp politically than I ever dared to hope or to expect. He said to me this: If it comes to it, Mr. Henry, sir, if there does indeed arise the necessity to raise up an army of Virginians to march to the north and relieve our much distressed friends in the town of Boston, not only will I lead such an army, sir, I'll finance it myself. And I dare say he has the means to do so. He married better than most of us could ever dream of doing. In fact, for the young gentleman here, that's the best advice I can give you, is that when you do take a wife, marry for money. But now I believe if I look into the future, sir, the not too distant future, I will be not only able to claim myself of being an acquaintance of his, but rather a true friend. And there are not many gentlemen who can make that boast, because he is a very reserved gentleman. Next year, in 1777, I'm going to come to his rescue, not once, but twice. While serving as your governor here in the governor's mansion, one day in the fall of next year, I'm going to receive an anonymous letter, deliberately unsigned. You must know that that does not happen in this enlightened age of the 18th century unless the strictest of secrecy is intended and desired. The author of it will assure me that I know him, that I will recognize him by his hand. I will not, but will later learn it from General Washington as Benjamin Rush of Philadelphia. And he will inform me of a number of men, very highly placed and prominent men in Philadelphia, in the Congress as well as not, who have lost complete faith and confidence in General Washington's abilities as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Line. They muse to one another, for example, I say, have you observed as I have, that the men under General Washington are not nearly so well organized nor disciplined as are the men under, say, Generals Gates, Lee, or Conway? Perhaps the time has come he should be replaced with one of those worthier generals. So here's why we're writing you, Your Excellency, the letter continues. And by the way, immediately put this letter to the fire upon the completion of its reading. But please begin to use your influence as Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Washington's home country, to begin sowing the seeds of discontent in his abilities so as to make it easier to remove him from command. Well, secret I keep it, sir. I close that letter up along with a cover letter of my own, and I send it to the hand of General Washington at Valley Forge at the time. And his mere knowledge of this conspiracy against him, which will eventually be known as the Conway Cabal, will break it all apart, and those men will be forever disgraced, including Ben Rush. Years later, in his old age, after he has served as 2 terms as the first president of these United States, and then voluntarily stepped down from that office, though there was no constitutional requirement that he do so. Which, by the way, do you know, prompts King George III, when he hears of it, to exclaim in a crowded room in a most unking-like fashion, By God, that's the greatest man living. Who would do that? But General Washington is going to be profoundly abused in his old age, chiefly at the hands of Mr. Jefferson and his Republicans. And I will learn from a mutual friend, Governor Henry Lee, Light Horse Harry Lee, that at those moments when General Washington is feeling so downhearted about those attacks upon his character and his honor, he will go to his private files where he keeps my letter advising him of the Conway affair still, will take it out, reread it, and take great comfort and succor from it, considering it to be the very symbol of friendship and loyalty itself. When I hear that, I will be so moved that I will write in a letter to one of my daughters, no greater compliment could be paid to any man living than to be considered the true and loyal friend to the father of our country. That same year, by the way, while he and his men are miserable and starving and freezing at Valley Forge, and his repeated requests to the Congress to be provided for, and it is their responsibility, but owing to their constant squabbling and bickering, I'm going to personally, and you're not going to thank me for it at first, but I'm going to go door to door and shake you down of your last shilling. And I'm going to be able to send him 8,000 hogs, 10,000 beeves, wagon loads of grains, medicines, blankets, and boots. And frankly, he will later tell me that that act on the part of all of Virginia, but myself especially, will actually save the Continental Line from disbanding in the winter of 1777. Our friendship will be solidified. I will tell you this too, that there is no man living that I admire and esteem more greatly than he who is going to save us with his valor. Please, sir.
How many of your fellow Virginians support the move for independence?
I thank the gentleman for his question, that being, how many Virginians support this motion towards independency? I'm given to understand that my friend John Adams of Massachusetts Bay has recently been asked the same question. And his response was that it seems that we seem to be divided evenly into thirds, he said, with a full third supportive of independence, a full third opposed, a full third completely indifferent. He may be speaking for New Englanders, but he is not speaking for the people of Virginia. Largely because of an action taken by Lord Dunmore, since turned a pirate, the likes of which we have not seen here in Virginia since the days of Blackbeard. Remember last year when he fled in cowardice and disgrace in June of '75, he boarded one of 3 ships that was on the York River at Yorktown. And he then began this new livelihood of piracy, stopping ships, molesting passengers, carrying off slaves, stealing cattle for provisions, burning what he could not take with him behind. He threatened to burn the capital city of Williamsburg to the ground, came so close as Mr. Burroughs Ferry, just 2 miles distant there on the James, fired upon Jamestown, upon Hampton Town, on a church on a Sunday, laid waste to Portsmouth. But his most offensive of these actions was in November of last year, 1775, when he stole a printing press from young Mr. Holt, a printer in Norfolk Borough who was sympathetic to our cause of liberty. Dunmore also stole 2 pressmen as hostages and had them print out a proclamation, which, among other things, offered freedom unto any slave or indentured servant who would run away from their rebel masters and take up arms with Dunmore. As I said at that time, oh, you may place a 3 penny per pound tax on tea and Virginians will remain indifferent, but you threaten to arm our Negroes against us? That did it. That, you see, is always our greatest fear. We fear an organized, successful rebellion of our slaves more than we do the might of the British Army. So that act of terrorism convinced most Virginians that now there is no turning back. Now this idea of returning as dutiful subjects to His Majesty is absolutely absurd and out of the question. All 112 men who attended the convention recently came with explicit instructions from their freeholders. Vote for independence. Now certainly there are some poor deluded souls who cannot shake that loyalty to the crown. And so long as they keep their sentiments to themselves, they will be left unmolested. You take Colonel William Byrd III, for example, and Ralph Wormley. These two men served upon the Royal Governor's Council prior to Dunmore's flight. They have been sequestered in their westernmost estates, and so long as they are not acting in any way that can aid or abet our enemies, they will be unharassed. There are others, though. Joshua Hardcastle, for example, who happened to be in Mr. Southall's establishment there on the rock.
But none of them here. That's not true. We do have 117 miles. But as royal governor of the colony of Virginia, we call this governor. If we ever had a queen, greatest king England has ever known was over one. Good Queen Bess. That's another story. His Majesty owns the building we're about to go through. Because His Majesty owns everything in the town, including you, me. But in point, this lady has the right of it. The monies are raised through taxes imposed by the House of Burgesses. So who owns the house? Colony of Virginia. And royal governors such as myself, and in my case my wife, the Countess of Dunmore, and our 7 children now are allowed to live there as long as I'm acting as the Viceroy for His Majesty, King George III. And yes, my wife and I are both related to him. So let's go see what it's like to live belongs to the house. It's called standing furniture. So come in, have a quick look into the pantry if you like, and a quick look into the parlor if you like, and then come gather around me. Were you impressed? And what impresses you most? And it's very impressive, is it not? What else? The military display. And we're standing on marble. There is no Virginian that can come in that door that's ever seen a marble before there, no matter what their status. It's the first one in the colony, and probably one of only 2 in this modern day, 1774. So the weapons speak loud and clear that you are a part of the greatest empire the world has ever known. Great Britain. It's the power and might of the empire as vested through His Majesty to the royal governors who have lived here. All 7 of us. Many think that when my wife and 7 children arrived here, 6 children then, excuse me, she walked in the front door, she looked at me and said, "John, I knew I shouldn't have let you decorate before I arrived." But that's not true. Because my wife, the Countess of Dunmore, has been in any number of powerhouses in Scotland, England, France. And all powerhouses have a display somewhat like this. Because the men of those houses are speaking to you, don't forget who I am. They won't be arranged just this way, but they'll be symmetric and orderly, and there'll be a show of power. So Lady Dunmore, the Countess of, my wife, she's not here. She and 3 of our daughters are shop hopping. You know what that means? I have never met a woman in my life that didn't know what shop hopping meant. Spending my money. But at any rate, Lady Dunmore knew exactly what this was and why it was here. This is marble. The black is Belgium, the white is English. It's quarried, brought here across the Atlantic with some of the finest craftsmen that you can find anywhere. just to put it down on the floor so we can walk on it. Unheard of. Most people never come through that door. Most people never do what you just did. They knock on the door. A man in livery, which is a civilian uniform, will answer the door and determine how far you come in. Probably not very far. Suppose you're here to see Mrs. Scott, the housekeeper. Are you actually going to walk through the front door and into Mrs. Scott's office? No. You'll be sent around to the servants' entrance on the other side. You might be here to see Captain Edward Ford, my agent. As soon as the footman finds that out, brings you in, sits you down, and says, wait, I'll come and fetch you. What do? You wait until you're fetched. You could be here to see my clerk, Mr. Menzies. His office isn't in the Royal Governor's house. His office is in the building to our left, which is the mirror image of the building of the cultural tenants or office. That's where you go to see Mr. Menzies for any amount of business. Suppose you actually have the social rank to see me. You'll be shown to the office on the right, just between the two mirrors. So most people don't come in the door, and those who do don't come very far past it. But you might be a member of our circle of friends. Your name might be Washington. Your name might be Wormley, Hill, Carter, Lee, Randolph, Nichols. You'll have the privilege of going by the arch of privilege. And here it is. Because on the other side of that is where we live. Man, his wife, and 7 children. Regardless of who you are or not, whether you're an earl, a countess, whether you're related to His Majesty or not, you don't let strangers come far into your home. You want to know who they are and what they're about. And if you feel comfortable with them, then they're allowed to the arch of prestige. Well, you look like very important people. Mrs. Scott isn't here to impede our progress. And Mrs. Scott isn't here. That door should be locked. The amount of goods in there in pounds, shillings, and pence is astronomical. If she's not here, lock the door. I'm sure my wife will have a word for her. Better Mrs. Scott than me. So are you ready to go upstairs? Crimson damask. Ladies, I'll put you through the examination. Damask is open up 3 times. What are they? There's 1. Wool. Almost cotton. We wear it in the summer because it's light and linen. It's then dyed this scarlet color. Expensive because cochineal bugs are about the size of my little finger. The end of it. Imagine how many you have to capture to dye that color. Above our heads, cut glass, not any glass, English. Finest cut glass in the world. I feel sorry for those who have Venetian cut glass. Finally. Here you are. Also matches crimson damask at the wall. And the hangings at the windows are crimson damask as well. The room is bordered in paper mache that's gilded gold. Everything about this room speaks volumes. So now I'm going to put you in my place. You can have the thrill of being an earl for a moment. I arrived October the 25th, 1771. 6 days later, there's a rap at the front door. Early in the morning, door opens, the footman sees Colonel Washington. Here to meet the royal governor. Now you're the royal governor. You've heard of Colonel Washington. Might be all you've heard about for 6 days. You want to make that first impression. How many times can you make it? Once. So where would you receive the colonel? Right here. For all the reasons we've just mentioned, and the fact that the colonel sooner or later glances out this window. Everyone does. And he's reminded that That avenue speaks volumes of this house. They're called avenues. The longer they go on, the more prestigious the house. And he's reminded, the man who lives in this house governs. With an S. The men who live outside this house are governed with a D. And that's not lost on him or the Randolphs or the Wormleys or the Carters, the Hills, the Lees, or the Nicholsons. So yes, you receive him right here. My wife also uses this as her dressing room in the morning. Comes here, sits at the window in the early morning light, puts on her face. Trust me, she doesn't have to. Mrs. Scott will attend her if necessary, and our daughters, including the newest, 5-month-old Lady Virginia. That's where she comes to be in mine. Only 5 months old. The other 3 daughters, at some point in the morning as my wife dresses, will be given some of their socialization skills from their mother. They have a governess, and I'm going to show you where Francoise Dali will be found. That's who's charged with many of the 2 eldest daughters. And Susan. Susan's only 9. She's beginning. So come along. And if you have daughters in your house in their teener years, I need say no more. The governess, Francoise Gali, French, sleeps here with 2 eldest daughters. It is Francoise Gali, never ending task in life as any governess to polish the rough edges off of a gemstone before it is presented to its society. Who are the gemstones in this case? The 2 eldest daughters. And it won't be very long, at 15 and 14. They'll be returning home to Edinburgh and London to be presented to their society by their mother, my wife, the Countess. They will take their place in society, and that will include, from time to time, breakfast at St. James Palace with His Majesty and Her Majesty. Such is the life they will lead. Would you like to see the ballroom?
Yes.
Well, come along, I'll show that. Here's why. There's a reason for that. And in a minute, you'll know why. You saw a piano A forte in my wife's dressing chamber. Small, from London. It is the newest instrument on the face of this earth. But it's not our favorite, and never will be. This harpsichord is made of big perfume. In London, 1 year before Mr. Handel paid his debt of nature, 1758. Only a scant few days before he conducted the Messiah to the light. We have cut glass English carpet, English wool carpeting. The walls are Prussian blue. Very popular in London. And all of this is the doings of my predecessor, the Baron de Baden. He arrived in 1768 when I lived here. He redecorated the room in the London fashion. Prussian blue is his choice for the wall, and you can see the wall. See that gilding around the room again? It's just like the frames around those portraits. I must apologize for those portraits. They're so modern, and I know many people don't like them modern. They're painted with that's Catherine and Braganza. Her husband. Part of her dowry was the port city of Bombay. Their Peter Lely. Here, coronation portraits of our reigning monarch, George III, God save the King, done by the portrait painter to the King, Alan Ramsey. And this, of course, is our King, Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg. They were married just 2 weeks, I think, 10 days, before the coronation, and they had never laid eyes on one another before the day they got married. Never seen each other. So, ballroom, we do country dances, as many other dances, including minuet. Gentlemen on one side, ladies on the other, in long chains, and that's why the room is longer than it is. On ball night, about 10 o'clock, we're going to be hungry, thirsty, and tired. We want to refresh ourselves because the night is young, and we will dance until we can't dance any longer. Come on in. On a ball night, let's say it's Her Majesty's birthday, January the 18th. That's not her birthday. But if you're Queen of England, you can pick any day you want as your birthday. Imagine that. So we come in, we've done our minuets, we've done some country dances, and there are dozens and dozens of them, and you're expected to know every one, or you wouldn't be here. So when the Master of Ceremonies says, King of Denmark's favorite, for as many as will, you are so inclined, you get into the long chain of men and the long chain of women, and we do a country dance. When we come in here, we find a ball supper late. It's not a meal. It's mostly sweets, finger foods, not a vegetable in sight. We eat, we'll stand, there'll be numerous wait staff in here to hold your plate while you eat. We toast. Here are the toasting glasses. I know they're a bit small, and that's for a reason. Many toasts will be had before we go back in and do our cotillions and reels. Many. And every time we toast, you drain the glass. Every time. You don't have to ask for a recharge. You just hold your glass up. It'll be recharged. By the time we get through His Majesty, Her Majesty, and the royal household, it's a large household, starting with the Prince of Wales. A few of the House of Lords, a few of the House of Commons, Lord and Lady Dunmore, we will be toasted. Some of the men of the House of Burgesses. If you're not very careful, the last thing you remember about your grand night at the Royal Governor's house is this room, while everyone else is dancing. So, how do we know, Your Lordship? The rules of engagement. How old are you? Anyone 6? 6 years of age. At about 6 or 7 or 8, you will have tutors, you will have keyboard instructors, you will have dance instructors, you will have etiquette and deportment instructors, so that by the time you reach here, you'll probably be invited when you are 16, 17 years old. You know exactly what to expect. And if you don't, if you embarrass yourself, you'll never see you. Welcome to the Virginia Society. Well, I'm going to pitch you out into the garden, and I wish my wife were here, for 2 reasons. One, you could make her acquaintance, and 2, she wouldn't be shop hopping. This makes me so nervous. Throw you out into the gardens. If the Countess were here, she could tell you everything that's blooming in that garden. She dearly loves botany, as does our Queen. So come along.
Together, things like nails, hinges, locks, and latches. We have a new building, furnishing the building with fireplace equipment, cooking tools, lighting devices, tools to get work done. We're rebuilding the running gear for one of our carriages you see back here. The wheelwrights are doing the woodwork, they're remaking the iron parts. Yeah, so any of that sort of work we generally will do. Yes?
I think